Welcome to the Peopling Podcast, where we hang out with brilliant human beings who teach us how to be better, well, humans, and decode what makes us tick and click. Inspired by the book Peopling, available on Amazon. Let's get this episode started. Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Peopling Podcast. I am your host, Kristi Nowrouzi, and it is such a great honor to be able to introduce you to this week's VIP guest. I get to bring to you Ford Taylor. And Ford is originally from Paris, Texas, and he's the founder of FSH Consulting Group and Transformational Leadership. And this is where he equips leaders and organizations to remove constraints and build healthy cultures and lead people well. He began his career growing CC Creations. It's a screen printing company that he and his wife, Sandra, had bought way back when. Ford, I think you had employed somewhere over 2,000 employees and had multi-millions of dollars in sales. Is that right?
That is correct.
That's so great. And in 1994, he was named Small Business Person of the Year for Texas and one of the top 10 for the United States in that same year. So he was making a splash many, many decades ago and still doing it. Today, Ford is an author. He has his book, Relational Leadership. Got it here in my hand. And he's the host of a podcast called Ford Taylor Talks. He's got amazing workshops, video on demand teaching, and he is a sought after keynote speaker, very involved in a number of different organizations. And I'm just so blessed and pleased to be able to share some of his valuable time with you and me today. So Ford, welcome. So glad to be with you.
Well, thank you, Kristi. It's an honor to be with you. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm looking forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. So take a few minutes. Tell us who Ford Taylor is. And I know that Ford isn't even your first name, but that's how everybody knows you. Who's Ford Taylor? Who makes up this man that we get to see today? And kind of fast forward as to where you're at today.
I was born and raised in Paris, Texas. I went to school at Texas A&M. When I was a senior, I met this little 17-year-old freshman who just captured my heart. And so I married her when she was a junior, but I put my career on hold. That's the best way to put it. And I had been assistant manager at a sporting goods store while I was in college. And so I went to work for them. They had 3 stores as the manager. I got hired away from that to another sporting goods store. And about a year later, I got a call saying they were going to close down our screen printer. They were going bankrupt. And I needed to find another one. A couple of days after that, they called back and said, by any chance, would you like to take on the debt and own this company? I talked to Sandra. We'd gotten married in January of 81. She graduated in May of 82. So in June of 82, we said, why not? Let's give this a shot. And if I knew back then what I know now about business, there's no chance I would have done that. Okay. It was bad. And we almost didn't make it. I mean, in 6 months, I actually called my mom and said, we're not going to make it. I'll never forget when I called, we had enough money to do the whole thing except for $5,000. So I called my parents and asked if I could borrow $5,000. And my mom started crying and said, I can't believe you went to college to make t-shirts. And, our first year was $180-something thousand a year. But before we did it, I said, Mom, you don't understand. T-shirts are going to be big. They're going to be in department stores and gas stations. They're going to be everywhere one day. Now, this back in 1982, they were not everywhere. I said, Mom, they're going to be bigger than blue jeans. And thank goodness they were. And over the next 16 years, we became the #1 decorated sportswear apparel company in America at about $300 million. Number 2 was $110 million. So that'll tell you. But in that, #1 on the trade journals, and I knew it. I tell people today, if you show me the most arrogant person in the room, I will show you the most insecure. And that's because that was me. And on that ride to the top and all my arrogance, I had a major moral failure. Thank goodness. I'll just say it, God got a hold of me and pulled me out of that. And I got a lot of help and a lot of counseling. And then 2 years later, I told my wife, I confessed to her what I'd done. At that point, I had left the big company. I was doing what I call one-off business consulting, with just different clients. And then I started doing some city reaching with helping some leaders in some cities. And she heard me give my first talk on a Thursday around that. On a Saturday morning, we were on vacation and said, I want to know the truth. And Kristi, it was probably other than accepting salvation earlier and then getting completely messed up. It was amazing. I'll never forget, I told her what I'd done and how sorry I was. And I told her, I said, I know you're going to leave me, and 100% of everything we own is now yours. There'll be no split. I will always take care of you and the girls forever. My only request is that you don't take my daughters away from me. And I'll never forget, I looked her in the eye and I said, I know you don't love me, so I know you're going to divorce me. And how could you? And I'll never forget, she looked me right square in the eye and said, why would I leave you? I love you more than anything. We'll get through this. And I'll never forget in my mind saying, I want to be like that. I want to be a person that can do that. And so I started to endeavor to actually use the material in my personal life that I had used in my business. And I started realizing, well, anyway, I had a client that called me in his office one day that I was consulting with. And he closed the door and he said, how often when you go into companies that you've either bought or you're consulting with, how often do you get these kinds of results? And I said, every time. And he said, then why are you not using this material to do your city impact work? And I said, well, if those leaders out there really knew me, they wouldn't follow me. And it's because Sandra and I had agreed at that point that we would never tell anybody about what happened. We obviously changed on that after we saw some individual couples get help. We decided to go public with it. But he talked me into, and I told him I'm not going to be one of those people who puts on a conference. People come, they get excited, and then 2 weeks later, they don't know what to do with it. And he said that won't happen with your material. So he taught me into bringing 30 people in the room. And I took them through a 6-week, basically a leadership brain dump. All they had was a pen and a legal pad. And at the end, they said, please do it again. I did it again. A third time, someone from Kim Blanchard's company was there. And she called him and then called me and said, I called Ken and told him I found someone who's doing what we're trying to do. And he told me to offer to build a PowerPoint and a manual for you. So all of a sudden, we had something that took on the name Transformational Leadership. And here we are almost 25 years later. And so now we're doing that same leadership training, and we actually call it leadership made operational. And it's because so often, leadership is around motivation and inspiration, but we don't give the practical, implementable ways to actually walk out how to lead, how to solve constraints. And so love what I do. It's interesting because last year I turned the company over to the guy that 20-something years ago asked me that question. So he is now running, he's the chief operating officer and running our consulting company and leadership training company.
I love that. That's an extraordinary lead up to where you're at today. And 25 years, that's a long time and a lot of people, a lot of lives impacted. I pulled something out of my
That's great. Yeah.
I had to look up the what is it? All rights reserved date at the bottom. Can you identify what year? Do you know what year this was from?
What does that say at the bottom?
I'm not going to tell you. I was wondering if you knew, like based on this, what year this might be.
Let me look. I know that we went to that logo and that manual in 2013. So that's been our.
It was 2013.
Yeah. So I know that we converted everything to that format in 2013. That's correct.
I love it. Here we are, mid 2026, right? And this was my first exposure to your training. And I think that this was one of the most impactful educational pieces I could have gotten when it comes to being a leader to yourself, being a leader in the room with other people, and communication, connection, creating a culture that you're proud of but want to be part of too. There's just so many different angles. What would you say? Like, I know you got a lot of material in there, but what is your favorite part? Like, if you had to just go in and like pull one thing out, what is either your personal favorite or what you see as the most impactful for leaders?
Well, let me answer it this way, okay? Because we've done this all over the world in multiple languages, and we do it with businesses, and we've planted 9,000 churches, and so we've done education systems. So we've done it in lots of places, and I think probably the best way to answer it is to tell you what we're told.
Okay, I love it.
And it's actually two tools that go back and forth that we're told that these, not the teachings, but the tools themselves. One of them is the social covenant, which is how to resolve conflict. And the other one is called BP MOSA, which is how to write a personal vision, purpose, mission, objectives, strategies, and action plan. And then how to do that, not just for your life, but for your family, your marriage, and even importantly for your whole organization. So those are the two that we get the most feedback on. And then there's about 30 more that are like number 3. So
love that. And you were recently a keynote speaker a few months back. I got to see you when you flew into Orlando, spoke to a large chamber there. Gosh, 150 people came to listen to you pack out the room and learn from you. And I took such extraordinary notes. And so every time I hear from you, I learn something new. I was hopeful I could ask a favor of you today because there was something that was really impactful to me. And it's something that we can infuse into our life on a very personal level, but also in our work environment. And I think the hardest part when I mess up is facing and admitting it, right? Because I want to deliver with excellence. I want to be not perfect, but great, right? And then I flunder and I mess up and I flop all over myself. And sometimes there's carnage in the way, right? Like sometimes I've left this path of like, I hurt her feelings, or, I may have damaged that relationship, or if I could go back and say this part over again, what I wouldn't give for that. Well, we can't do that. But what we can do is a really extraordinary apology. And I think that's one of the most underestimated love and leadership tools that is out there. And you have created the most amazing apology I have ever heard and experienced. Would you be willing to share that with us today?
I would, and it is a part of that social covenant, So, in that covenant, let's kind of set the stage for a minute. We tell people to agree in any organization. So we call that two or more people in relationship as an organization. So that could be a marriage, a family, a business, a sports team. And we talk about leadership as influence. And we can influence up through our boss, our parents, across. I mean, all kinds of ups. Okay, our sports coach, across, that could be our neighbors, our peers, our coworkers. It could be down, that's our employees, our children, and the most important one, I believe, is the influence we have with ourselves. Now, there are others that have fifth category, and that's the influence we have with God. And I don't talk about that everywhere because it depends on who our audience is. And so, I believe that we all have influence. We might as well make it a positive one. And so part of that is how to resolve conflict, which is the social covenant. So we agree on how we're going to treat one another in our organizations. And then from that, we agree on how are we going to deal with it if we break it. And so lots of times people believe conflict is bad. I don't believe that. I believe unresolved conflict is bad. Conflict plus resolution leads to unity, engagement, and productivity. And so if we break it, knowing how to go to someone, and we teach to go in humility, I might be wrong, pre-forgiveness, I'm not here to hurt you, I'm here to restore the relationship. Love, which means I care more about you than I care about how you feel about me. And truth and the facts, because sometimes they're not the same. And I'm not going to go into that right now. But when we mess up, if we know we messed up, now sometimes in that social covenant, it's because someone comes and tells us. We might have a blind spot and not even know we did it. But often we do know we did it. So we don't have to wait for people to come. But in that covenant, we agree that if we mess up, that we're going to apologize a certain way in order to restore the relationship. And it has 6 steps. And step number 1 is that we admit what we did. We just say it. There's no ifs, there's no buts, there's no explanation. Kristi, when I poured that coffee on your head in front of that 1,000 people up on stage, I was wrong. I mean, whatever it is, but you just say it. And then number 2 is you just use 3 simple words. I was wrong. And then step number 3 is an actual apology. Now, we believe that I am sorry is the best apology, but if people were told you're a sorry little son of a gun growing up by parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, sports coaches, teachers, it means something different. So we tell those people just use the word I apologize. And be careful not to say I want to apologize, because that's not an apology. So step number 1, admit what we did. Number 2, I was wrong. Number 3, I'm sorry. And then number 4 is, will you forgive me? Or when you can, will you forgive me? Pause for 2 seconds, give them a chance. They may not, but you've done your part. And then step number 5 is, Kristi, I give you permission to hold me accountable to never behave that way again with you or anyone else if you see it. And then step number 6, is there anything else that I owe you an apology for, or anything else you would like to talk about? Because we don't want to leave anything out there between us that I may still not be aware of unless you tell me. And so we believe that when you do all 6 steps, just the stories that we've heard from all over the world, marriages being restored, and people going back to work for their old boss. I mean, just one story, children and parents who won't even speak to each other, one 6-step apology, and then go to dinner that night. We just hear the stories all over.
It is so extraordinary. I was dating Andrew in 2013. And I remember sharing this with him, and we both agreed we'd love to make that a foundation when things go sideways, right? Because they always do. There's no such thing as a constant, perfect relationship. Somebody's going to mess up somewhere. And you know what I was in the habit of doing? I was in the habit of justifying or defending myself when I would go to apologize. Hey, Ford, I'm sorry I did that, but you interrupted me, or but I was having a bad day, like whatever. I would fill it in, and anything after that but negates everything that came before the but. And then who am I making it about? I'm making it about me and not about you. And you were the one that was wronged. And so there's so many elements. It's simple, but it's layered and deep, and it's just really truly incredible. It's life changing. And any leader out there, if you are a leader of people, if you're a leader of clients, or if you are a leader of a household, this is words to live by that will reshape and hopefully reconnect some damaged relationships. That last step, allowing that space, because that's a very vulnerable place. Like you might get a dump truck loaded on you. That's a very scary place to be, but man, what a great opportunity to clear the air, because you might receive acceptance of that apology right here. But what about the 18 things that are still lingering that what we're just not going to talk about?
Yeah, and as you know, Kristi, I tell married couples, especially men, you don't ask that sixth question the first time you apologize unless you're ready to hear the answer. Because men, we don't remember what we did yesterday or last week, and our spouses remember what we did in the second grade, 10th grade, high school, college, 5 years ago, last year, and last week. And we just don't, our brains are just different. And so I warn them, don't ask, is there anything else I owe you an apology for, unless you're truly ready to hear it. And that works both ways, of course.
It does.
But if you're willing to hear it, it is the best question you can ask in an apology. But you
It's
got
so
to be
extreme.
willing. I tell people, if you're really going to ask it and you mean it and you want that relationship, we get told all over the world, and I don't know anybody that has a better marriage than we do, thanks to her. It's because of Sandra. But we get told that all over the world. But it takes that sixth question. Honey, is there anything else that I haven't apologized for, that I owe you an apology for? And what happens is you'll find a place the answer becomes no. That there's not anything else, but that can take some work to get there. But if you're going to defend because you don't remember you did it, then just don't ask it until you're ready. But when you're ready, those last three steps are game changers.
Solid advice, and really just life changing. I hear a lot of people say I'm working towards, or I'm becoming this, leader, and whatever their definition of leader is. I think the most extraordinary definition of leadership is somebody who could be vulnerable enough and humble enough to make that kind of an apology and open the doorway for, is there anything else that we need to clear up here so that we are on solid ground? How did you formulate those 6 steps?
You really want to know?
Yes.
So when Sandra and I were going through what we were going through, we were talking about everything, and it was breaking my heart to answer her questions. Because I told her, if there's anything you want to know, I'm not going to hold back. So please don't ask if you don't want to know. And she tells people it was way uglier than anything her brain could imagine. And it was breaking my heart to watch the pain this was putting on her. But I told her I would share everything. But it was devastating because I did it. She didn't. She didn't deserve to have all this pain. And I literally was praying and said, what can I do to stop the pain for her? And I literally woke up in the middle of the night one night and wrote down 5 steps. And the next morning I got on my knees and I used those first 5 steps. And she never asked me another question. And it wasn't to get her not to ask me questions at all. That was never I just didn't want her to keep hurting. And then I started teaching the 5-step apology immediately in all of our training. And then I was teaching it, I think it was in Dayton, Ohio, shortly after that. And a Jewish man came up to me and said, you left out the 6th step. And I said, well, what is it? He goes, is there anything else? I said, done. And so that's how it happened, is that in the middle of the night, I woke up with the 5, and then someone came and said, you left out one. I said, man, you are 100% right. And that's, I don't know, 20 something years ago, 24, I guess. But anyway, so yeah, but someone came up and said, you might want to add. They had never heard the first 5, but they said, you left out the 6th one. And so I just grabbed onto it and said, you're right. That's so much better. But that's how it
I
happened.
love it when people contribute to something that's already great, and then it makes it amazing. That's awesome, awesome feedback from them. One of the things that is so extraordinary, especially going through firsthand, your transformational leadership is you help the leaders create their vision and their purpose and their mission statements and really get clarity for themselves and for their organization. And so that's where it's knowledge with action. One of the things that I like that I think that our audience would really appreciate too is how you help reshape culture. And you've got a lot of different teachings. You've got so many different angles and perspectives that we don't have time for today. And I hope that people get their hands on your book, invite you in for workshops, go to your video on demand library, and really lean into this because it truly is transformational. But one of the things that stands out to me that you take a stance on that is so in our face, but not talked about for some reason, that has such a huge impact on culture in the workplace is gossip. And you
Yeah.
said that, I was like, oh my gosh, how come more teachers and leaders and coaches and consultants aren't squashing that? Because it breeds like cancer. It spreads and it hurts people. It hurts the bottom line. It hurts the objectives of companies. And yet we're not really talking about it. How did you come to the conclusion like this needs to be part of these teachings?
Well, if I can use God's word for just a minute, the Bible, there's
Please.
a place in there on how you transform cities. And it gives very specific directions. And it says, feed the hungry, house the homeless, take care of the orphans and the widows, take care of the prisoners. I call them returning citizens who come back from prison, take care of the foreigners in your land, and don't gossip. It's interesting that don't gossip is in that list. It seems like an outlier. And when I saw that, I started thinking there's got to be more to this. And so I started looking up all the places that talks about slander and gossip. And as I did it, I started realizing it's a trust breaker. And everything we teach in leadership is the first step is building trust in what we call stage one. And we call it the visionary stage, but the key is building trust. And I started realizing gossip, I believe, is the number one trust breaker in organizations around the world. I also believe it's the number one undiagnosed addiction in the world today. And I tell people, if you don't believe me, try stopping. And so the way we put it, number one, the definition we use is when you say something negative about someone to someone else who's not part of the problem or part of the solution. And if you can use that simple definition, I think people will find out. Well, after we started teaching it years later, a lot of research came out on gossip. And based on research, most companies in America and globally, I don't know, probably the same, I wouldn't be surprised. You could cut your workforce down by 20% if you just cut out the hours spent gossiping. So not only is there productivity lost, there's trust loss. So it's probably even more than that. So think about it this way, Kristi. Great people talk about vision, ideas, and solutions. Average people talk about things. Small people talk about other people. Smaller people let them. Smaller people join them. And even smaller people tell others. And so I challenge people, which category do you fall in and which one do you want to fall in? And so when people look at that, the jaws drop. I mean, I've had people come up to me and go, what am I going to talk about all day if I can't talk about other people? I mean, they just didn't even realize it till they heard it. What am I going to do all day? And I said, get your work done. I mean, but yeah, when the organizations we worked with, when they call and say, man, the difference in our company now, and all that's in the social covenant, that's just all part of that whole social covenant process, that when that gossip goes down, trust goes up, productivity goes up. I mean, you should see the statistics. Sick days go down. I mean, there's all kinds of stats that prove not only is it the right thing to do morally, it's the right thing to do profitability in a company or productivity in a family. So yeah, I'm a big fan of it.
Before we dive any deeper into this conversation, I want to take a quick moment to share a tool that has significantly improved my life, and that's called Growth Day. It's like having world-class mentors right in your pocket. There are daily challenges that help grow your confidence, your inspiration, and your drive. Check out the show notes for your link to a free trial, and don't let another moment pass you by without checking out Growth Day.
Can I give your listeners a freebie?
Yes, please.
If they'd like to see a little bit deeper teaching on this, they could text the words social covenant to 53123. There's no charge, there's no cost to it. We literally did it just to help people. So social covenant to 53123. And it literally is a 51-minute training that you get a little drip 2 to 3 minutes every day, or you can watch it all at once and it just comes straight to your text. But everything we're talking about is in that little 51 minutes if people would like to hear more about what you're sharing with them today.
Extraordinary. Thank you for that gift. That is awesome. I got that a couple years ago when I got retrained through Patty with one of the organizations I was part of. And we need this in our organizations. And a little story I can share here. I go into government offices, corporations, those kinds of things for a different kind of teaching. I'll teach about money or credit, finances, those kinds of things typically. And it never fails that somebody pulls me aside afterwards and they start, asking some questions. And the conversation often tends to morph into what's happening at work for them. So, they'll come to me with a money problem, and that is a real life. It affects everything. But then it turns into their workplace. And it's not necessarily their job. They'll go home and they'll tell their spouse or they'll tell their best friend, I don't like my job. But what they wind up telling me is that they don't like their work environment. And so much of that is solved when they get to learn about the social covenant that you teach. And there's a solution here, friends. There's a solution created, and Ford is leading that mission here.
Hey, Kristi, just real quick. In
Yes.
those organizations that we work with, we literally tell them to put in writing in their covenant and their social agreement that if someone gossips to you, you are to tell them they got 48 hours to go talk to the person that they talked about. And I got news for you. You'll be amazed when everybody agrees to do that, how much it stops. And here's the key. Here's what people, the big thing about that is not only does it stop the gossip, but let's just think for a minute. If you came to me and gossiped about, let's just say Crystal, somebody we both know, and I couldn't stop you. You threw up before I could stop you. And I would just ask you, am I part of the problem? Well, no. Well, am I part of the solution? No. Well, then you got 48 hours to go talk to Crystal. And I want to hear back from both of you. You got it worked out. And if you don't, I'm going to let her know. I'm not going to tell you what you said because I'm not going to get in the middle of it, but I am going to tell her you're talking negatively about her. So you got 48 hours. Well, when you tell people to do that and you hold them accountable to it, now guess what? You now know forever. You now know forever that no one could ever say something negatively to me about you.
Wow.
See, so not only did I build trust with Crystal, and now you built trust with Crystal, I built trust with you because you would know that if I'm going to send you, I'm not going to let anybody else do that to you either. And I tell people, if someone will gossip to you about someone else, you can rest assured they will gossip about you to someone else.
That is 100% the truth. There's not boundaries. Sometimes we like to think that we're immune to it, and if you're listening, you are part of the problem.
Well, I'm going to say, we got two choices. We can blame everybody else for being part of the problem, right? Or we can look in the mirror and say, I am the problem. And when we start saying I am the problem, guess what? We start getting fixed. When we start blaming everybody else for being the problem, we stay in our muck. And so that influence that we have with ourselves, that's a big one.
That is so significant what you just said. I used to be that person. I would blame the whole world for my problems. And it was probably your training that led me to put on your big girl pants, right? Be an adult in this situation and take responsibility. And when I actually got to sit down and face the consequences of my choices, I'm looking at it and I go, yeah, none of that is the world's fault. That's the expression of the choice that I made. That was the ripple effect of what I chose to do. And it's life changing when you can stop, take ownership, and say, so what do I want different out of this now?
I agree. I tell people all over the world, aren't you glad I made so many mistakes? And it's because so much as you know of what we teach, you've heard my stories, came not just from successes. I mean, so much of it came from the failures. And I don't mind sharing stories of both. I want people to experience success based on some of our successes, but I also want them either not to experience the failures because we did and show them how not to, or know how to overcome it. So I jokingly say, aren't you glad I messed up so often? To be able to do this.
Isn't that the best teacher though, is learning the hard way, learning through your failures or through somebody else's failures so you don't have to experience it yourself. And that's part of what this is about is your expert teachings and your lived experience, good, bad, and indifferent. You can be an example to others. It's so
I
great.
call it good, bad, and ugly. I thought I got the good, the bad, and the ugly.
This is extraordinary. Ford, part of the Peopling book has a section in it called Be the Change. And I love to ask this question that is called the Be the Change Challenge. What is one piece of advice, guidance, suggestion that you could give to our audience today that will help us be a better influence, a better role model, a better leader, a better person to those that are around us that we have influence with and through? What would that be from you today?
Well, I'm going to do it a couple of ways, okay? One is look in the mirror and just ask, who am I and who do I want to be? Write it down and go become who you want to be. It's very, very simple. Put it on paper. When I die, this is what I want people to say about me at my funeral. And I'm going to live a life toward that. So that would be number one. The other thing I would ask your audience, and I'm going to count to 5 and give them a chance to write down the answer. Just write down yes or no, okay? If you knew you were going to die, is there any relationship that you have today that you would want reconciled? Is there anything that you might owe an apology for? So I'm just going to count to 5 and you just write down yes or no. If you knew you were going to die, is there anybody out there that you want to make right before you die? So second question, if you knew you were going to die, would you go make it right? So you just wrote down their name. Now the question is, yes or no, would I go make it right? So now I'm going to talk to the ones who wrote, yes, you're going to die. You may not know when, but you're going to. And if you said there's someone that you want to make right, and you wrote that you would if you knew you were going to die, if you have integrity, then you'll go make right because you said you would if you knew. And I just told you, you're going to. So when you start doing a lifestyle that way, you never walk out of a room worrying about the damage that you did because you're going to make it right, because you would never want that damage left behind. And so always think, what if I die tomorrow? What would I do today differently? And so I would recommend, if you have someone like that, go make it right. And if there's anything in that relationship that you take responsibility for, even if it's 1%, if there's 100% problem and 1% of it's yours, go to them and admit that 1%, say I was wrong, say I'm sorry, say, will you forgive me? Or when you can, will you will. Give them permission to hold you accountable and ask them if there's anything else and go make that relationship right.
That could potentially be restoring decades worth of pain and hurt and who knows what else. But that simple act of obedience to this exercise could literally change your life, maybe the life of those around you too,
We've all got influence. Might as well make it a positive one.
Words to live by. It's so good. Ford, thank you for your heart. Thank you for your mistakes so you can share the results of what you did because of those mistakes made with us and helping to make the world a better place. I love your posture, your heart for God, your heart for Sandra. I love her heart for you. And what an extraordinary lived experience that has impacted just thousands of people. Who knew that something that would have been your personal rock bottom wound up reformulating the man you were to become? Like, who knew that that's what it would take to help you get here? And through that, you get to minister and lead so many other people to who they see as possible. And it's just,
I hope your audience is encouraged. When I do our training, as you know, I actually read my suicide letter. There was a time that I was holding a gun and was afraid to go outside. When you talk about rock bottom, you don't get much lower than that. And so I hope your audience is encouraged by what they've heard, because there's nothing that you've done, nothing that can't be overcome. And sometimes that takes forgiving yourself. And so there's just nothing you can do. So Kristi, thank you for having me on today. Another thing we teach is, often as leaders, we don't lead well because we're just worn out. And I call that having an empty gas tank. And so we encourage people to do a T-chart. And on one side, write all the things that fill your tank. On the other side, write the different things that empty your tank. Food, places, people, activities, including people. Today, Kristi, you have filled my tank. Thank you.
Thank you. And you have mine. Thank you so much. Extraordinary conversation. We could talk forever, but I know you are a very, very busy and wanted man. So thank you for carving out time from your incredible schedule to share time with us. This has been very, very special. Appreciate you. And thank you so much for joining us this week. We'll see you soon. Thanks for tuning in to the Peopling Podcast, and grab your copy of the Peopling book on Amazon, and let's keep this connection movement going. Until next time, be curious, be kind, and keep peopling like you mean it.